Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where the air is sharp enough to sting your lungs. The sea snarls with icy waves, and the nights stretch longer than your patience ever could. You're with the Viking settlers now trudging northward into lands where winter feels less like a season and more like a permanent resident. The snow crunches underfoot. The wind cuts through every layer you thought would protect you. And you realize, yeah, you probably won't survive this. But let's try anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots, well, boots might be too generous or stiff with frozen seawater from the landing. You drag yourself toward the settlement's cluster of longhouses, each one a low-timbered beast half buried in snow. The roofs sag under icy weight, but smoke creeps lazily from the peaks, a promise that fire still beats somewhere inside. You push past drifts that slap at your knees, shoulders aching, and you can almost hear the ancestors daring you to keep moving. For a Viking, turning back wasn't an option. The first sensation you can't shake is the air. It isn't just cold, it's alive. It needles into your nostrils. It stiffens the hairs on your arms. It feels like some malicious spirit of the north is tugging at every thread of warmth you've managed to keep. You hold your breath longer than you should, just to get a break from inhaling frost. Historians still argue whether these early settlers were driven by hunger ambition or sheer stubbornness. But what's certain is that they stepped into climates so unforgiving even the wildlife looked offended by your presence. The long night has already begun. In the north, the sun doesn't just dip politely below the horizon, it slinks away for weeks at a time, leaving you with a sky that glows faint blue at noon and black the rest of the day. Imagine your body trying to tell time by a candle that won't burn. Some say this darkness bred resilience. Others whisper it bred madness. You can't help but think it's both. You shuffle toward the fire-lit doorway of a longhouse. Inside, the air is dense with smoke and the smell of bodies, men, women, children, goats, and a cow that seems to be chewing louder than necessary. The floor is packed earth-hard as stone, and you realize the snow outside was almost gentler. Still, it's warmer here. You join the huddle, pressing close to strangers who don't remain strangers long, because nothing says bonding quite like being jammed between someone's elbow and a sheep's rump for 12 hours straight. The Vikings have tricks for nights like this. You'll learn them soon. Banking a fire so embers smolder till morning, layering wool and fur until you look like a walking haystack, and eating just enough fatty stew that your belly radiates heat like a poor man's stove. But tonight, you're the outsider. You're the one shivering so hard your teeth play percussion over the settlers' low murmurs. They eye you with half pity, half amusement. They've seen this look before newcomers, stunned by the cold that never ends. It isn't all misery. There's laughter somewhere in the smoke. A child squeals as her father pretends to wrestle a goat. A grandmother's voice rises, weaving a story of Thor's hammer smashing frost giants into snowdrifts. The flames flicker and shadows dance across the timber beams, turning the room into a theater of giants, gods, and monsters. You breathe slower, lulled by the rhythm of voices, by the warmth of bodies pressed around you, by the illusion fragile, though it is, that you might make it till dawn. And yet the cold presses in, even here. Every draft is a thief, every crack in the wood a reminder that outside waits a world eager to freeze you solid. You tug your cloak tighter, fingers stiff, and glance at the glowing embers. If those die, you die. Simple as that. There's no modern thermostat to adjust, no insulated windows to shut. Just the ancient deal: keep the fire alive, and the fire keeps you alive. The quirky thing about these first settlers is how little they complained. You'd think endless nights and frostbitten toes would inspire more grumbling, but the sagas barely mention it. Instead, they immortalized battles, voyages gods, and betrayals, almost as if admitting how brutal the cold was gave it more power. Still, scholars debate whether those silences in the sagas are pride or just storytelling priorities. Either way, the cold was as constant a character in their lives as Odin himself. So here you are, your body still trembling, your breath a pale fog in the dark longhouse. You close your eyes, press your back into rough wool and unfamiliar shoulders, and let the fire's crackle become your lullaby. You don't know it yet, but this first night is just an initiation. Every winter that follows will test you, strip you, force you to invent new ways to trick death until the thaw returns. For now, all you need to do is survive the next few hours, clinging to warmth like a secret. You wake to the groaning of timber beams as the longhouse shoulders another weight of snow. The roof sags slightly, then steadies a giant wooden ribcage holding back the fury of the night. You're lying close to the hearth's fading glow, your cloak stiff with frost at the edges. Outside, the wind lashes the world like some angry god who hasn't had his morning mead yet. Inside, it's only a little warmer, and you're reminded that Viking houses were never built for luxury. They were built for survival. The longhouse around you stretches like a ship turned upside down, narrow and long, its spine of timbers running straight down the middle. Every crack between planks whispers a draft. You tug your blanket higher, knowing well that these walls leak warmth almost as quickly as the fire can make it. Still, compared to the frozen dark outside, this space is a fortress. Not beautiful, not comfortable, but fiercely practical. Historians still argue whether these longhouses were inspired by ship design or grew independently from the settlers' building traditions, but either way, the resemblance isn't lost on you. Here, you're a passenger on winter's endless voyage. Your nose stings from the smell of smoke and wet fur. The hearth sits at the center, a pit lined with stone still smoldering under yesterday's ash. The smoke lingers because chimneys haven't been invented yet, not in this world. Instead, the haze curls upward, searching for cracks in the thatched roof. You cough, then smile faintly, realizing this choking mist also drives away fleas and lice. A side effect, but a welcome one. You can almost call it the Viking version of pest control. Marinate in smoke until your parasites surrender. Children stir nearby, kicking straw and muttering in sleep. Their beds aren't beds at all, just piles of hay strewn across the dirt. You shift your weight, and the ground reminds you it's still frozen solid beneath. Every creak in your body echoes in the silence, and you wonder how these settlers ever managed to rest in such conditions. But you notice something else. The walls themselves are alive with insulation. Peat moss clay, and sometimes even animal dung, have been packed into gaps, sealing against the cruel drafts. Quirky, yes, but effective. And no one complains about the smell, not when toes are at stake. A mother stirs from the corner, rising to check the embers. She stokes them with care, piling on peat and wood chips, coaxing a faint glow back into flame. You watch as sparks leap upward, illuminating the rafters where bundles of dried fish and herbs hang. This isn't just a house. It's storage, kitchen, barn, and fortress rolled into one. The family goat bleats softly, shifting its weight near the wall, while a cow exhales steam into the chill. The animals are more than company. They're insulation-breathing blankets with horns. The roof creaks again, snow sliding down in heavy sheets. For a moment you imagine the weight, breaking through, dumping icy death on the sleeping crowd. But the timbers hold. Built from massive logs and lashed together with rawhide, these houses endure storm after storm. Some archaeologists believe the Vikings even banked snow against the walls on purpose, using winter's own force as insulation. It's an odd thought that the very thing trying to kill you could also keep you alive, but it wouldn't be the first contradiction in northern life. The longhouse isn't silent for long. Soon voices murmur, a child coughs, a dog shakes snow from its fur. A man stumbles in from outside dragging a frosty breath and stamping his boots. He mutters about the drifts rising higher than his waist, about how the gods seem intent on burying the settlement alive. He collapses near the hearth, rubbing his hands, grateful for even a little warmth. His beard is white with frost, his eyes red from wind. The others nod, they know the struggle. Complaints don't change the weather, but sharing them eases the burden. The quirky thing about Viking longhouses is how much they relied on bodies. Human animal all pressed close under one roof, their collective heat pushing back against the void. Privacy none, comfort barely, but survival absolutely. It's the same principle that keeps you alive when you huddle in a tent with friends. Misery shared becomes warmth multiplied. Some sagas even hint that gatherings in winter weren't just necessity, but bonding rituals. The hardships forced kinship, weaving ties as strong as the beams overhead. You glance at the roof again, smoke seeping through straw, and you wonder if these people ever longed for windows. But glass is rare, too costly, too fragile for this world. A tiny slit, covered with a stretched animal hide, is all the daylight you'll get. And in midwinter, daylight is a rumor at best. You sigh, realizing that the longhouse isn't just shelter. It's a coffin-shaped ark carrying you and everyone inside through months of cold until spring resurrects the land. Still, there's something deeply human in this place. The smell of stew clings to the air. The sound of soft singing rises from a corner, half lullaby, half prayer. A child curls tighter into straw. You wrap your cloak tighter, shoulders brushing against your neighbors. For a moment, you feel almost safe, as though these rough walls can keep out the darkness forever. Almost. The longhouse has survived the night, but you know that survival isn't guaranteed without the flicker of fire at its core. The hearth, a modest pit of stones and embers, has become more than a tool. It's the heartbeat of the household. You watch as one of the settlers crouches low, blowing gently at the smoldering ash, coaxing it back to life. The faint glow responds with reluctant sparks, and soon a thin tongue of flame curls upward, greedy for fuel. You sigh in relief, because without this fragile blaze, the longhouse is nothing more than a wooden tomb. It's smoky. Yes, so smoky. Your eyes sting and your lungs ache. But that's the price of warmth. The Vikings didn't have chimneys. The smoke drifts lazily, testing the rafters, seeping through cracks, sometimes swirling back down into your face. You cough, eyes watering, but you know this haze is as much protection as it is nuisance. Fleas, lice, and other pests hate it more than you do. And in a world where hygiene is a luxury, that alone makes the fire worth the sting. You may be slowly curing yourself like a slab of ham, but at least you're pest-free. The family circles close as the fire strengthens. A child rubs sleep from her eyes and pokes at the flames with a stick that's probably longer than she is tall. A grandmother hums softly, ladling porridge into rough wooden bowls. The pot has sat by the fire all night, thick with oats and fish scraps simmering gently when the flames allowed. The smell is humble earthy, but it fills the longhouse like a promise. Food and heat, twin luxuries in the frozen north. Historians still argue whether fire was kept burning 24 hours a day or whether some households dared let it die out. The sagas remain silent on the detail, but most scholars believe extinguishing the fire was unthinkable. Matches didn't exist. Flint was precious, and kindling was often damp. To lose the hearth's ember was to gamble with frostbite and death. That's why Viking families mastered the art of banking the fire-burying coals under a blanket of ash before bed, insulating them so they smoldered till morning. It was less an art than a nightly prayer. Do it right, and you greet the dawn with warmth. Do it wrong, and you wake to darkness colder than any nightmare. The flames spread light dancing against the smoke-stained beams. Shadows of rafters stretch and twitch, creating a theater of giants above your head. The settlers talk in low tones, gossip about neighbors, mutterings about Odin's favor, even jokes that crack smiles despite the icy morning. The hearth is not just warmth, it's community. Imagine it as the Viking version of a television. Everyone gathers around it, stares into its glow, listens to stories, sometimes even falls asleep beside it. Entertainment, dinner heat, and survival all rolled into one smoldering pit. Of course, the fire isn't reliable. Wet wood hisses and spit sparks fly dangerously, and the smoke occasionally thickens until the whole longhouse coughs as one. A man rises, throws open the hide that covers the slit of a window, and a wave of frozen air slices in, clearing the haze but stealing heat. The room groans collectively, then laughs because what else can you do? In the balance between suffocating on smoke and freezing solid compromise is daily life. Your cloak catches faint sparks, leaving tiny burn holes that will mark you as part of this place, whether you like it or not. You hold your hands out, grateful for the sharp sting of heat against numb fingers. A dog sprawls dangerously close to the embers, fur singeing just a little, but it doesn't move. Even animals know the hearth is sacred. Without it, nothing else in the longhouse matters. Quirky as it sounds, some believe smoke itself carried spiritual meaning. Fire was a gift from the gods, and the smoke was a bridge to them, curling upward toward the unseen. Sitting here half blinded by fumes, you wonder if Odin himself isn't squinting down, amused at the sight of mortals clinging to warmth like desperate moths. The fire's glow deepens, and for a moment the cold feels less like an enemy and more like a forgotten dream. Your body loosens shoulders, drop, and the rhythm of the crackling logs becomes hypnotic. Still, you never stop watching the embers. If they falter, so does your hope. You lean closer cheeks, hot back chilled, caught in that narrow balance between survival and surrender. Outside, the wind screams against the timbers demanding entry. Inside, the hearth spits defiance in sparks and smoke. And you, pressed among these settlers, realize you've just learned the first law of Viking winter guard the fire, and the fire guards you. Fail it, and the North will claim you without hesitation. You notice quickly that the fire alone is never enough. Its glow warms the air and flickers, but the cold still pushes through every crack in the walls. The Vikings knew this, and they had a solution that feels equal parts brilliant and miserable: bring the animals inside. At first, you think it's just a goat or two near the doorway. Then you realize the low rhythmic sound you've been hearing isn't just snoring settlers, it's the steady breathing of cows. A sheep shuffles its hooves against the packed dirt floor, and the unmistakable smell of dung hangs in the smoky air. It's jarring at first, but then it hits you. This is central heating Viking style. The longhouse isn't divided by neat hallways or separate bedrooms. No, it's one vast communal chamber, and humans share it with their livestock. At night, the animals' bodies become radiators. Their warm breath, their dense coats, even the heat of manure, steaming faintly in the corners. It all raises the temperature by just enough to keep everyone alive. Historians still argue whether this was planned architecture or sheer necessity, but the result is the same. Without the animals, winter would have taken far more lives. It's noisy. A cow shifts its bulk tail, swishing dangerously close to your head. A goat bleats suddenly in the dark, startling the children awake. Chickens flutter from their roosts on the rafters, scattering feathers into the smoky haze. The sounds blend with the crackle of the hearth, until you realize the longhouse itself is alive, a symphony of survival that doesn't care about your comfort. Of course, this setup has its quirks. The floor isn't just frozen earth anymore, it's layered with straw hay and whatever bedding can be scrounged. It soaks up waste, and though someone dutifully cleans it, the smell never leaves. You wrinkle your nose, only to watch a child laugh rolling in the hay with a lamb, as if the stench doesn't exist. When death lurks outside, you don't waste energy complaining about the smell inside. The presence of animals changes the rhythm of the night. A cow's sigh of warm breath drifts across the room like a gentle fog. You feel it on your chilled skin and realize you're oddly grateful. That same cow may be milked tomorrow, meat next year, but tonight it's a furnace with horns. You huddle closer, not caring about dignity, only about heat. This is survival stripped bare. There's also symbolism here. The sagas tell of humans and animals sharing more than space, they shared fate. Odin's ravens whispered knowledge. Thor's goats pulled his chariot and were eaten only to revive the next day. The line between man and beast was thin, blurred by necessity and by myth. You can't help but wonder if crowding into a longhouse with your herd reinforced that bond, reminding the settlers that survival was always communal, always dependent on more than just human will. The laughter of the children rises again as a calf nudges them with its damp nose. A woman scolds gently, pulling them back to the fire. She tucks her cloak around the youngest, settling them between her body and the warm flank of a sheep. The child relaxes instantly, eyes fluttering shut, a smile curling faintly, even as the wind screams outside. It's a scene that feels timeless, almost tender, despite the filth. Survival here is not grim. It's practical, and sometimes oddly comforting. You shift uncomfortably on the straw, pressing your hand against the damp floor. It's not pleasant, but it's warmer than bare earth. You try to imagine a modern house built this way, a living room shared with cows, a kitchen buzzing with chickens, a bedroom guarded by goats. The thought makes you chuckle softly. It would be chaos today, but here it's ingenious. The quirky detail is that the animals probably saved more Viking lives than any prayer to Odin ever did. And still, the debate lingers among scholars. Did they truly plan it this way, designing longhouses as giant bioheaters? Or did desperation force them to adapt? The evidence is scattered fragments of sagas, post holes in frozen soil, smoke-stained rafters that whisper of both design and accident. But as you sit here, leaning against a cow that couldn't care less about your existence, You realize the answer doesn't matter. Planned or not, it worked. The fire crackles again, sparks leaping into the smoky air. A cow shifts size and settles into sleep. The warmth spreads, uneven but steady, a living blanket of flesh, fur, and flame. And you press shoulder to horn, finally begin to feel something that almost resembles comfort. In this frozen land, warmth comes from the strangest alliances. You wake again, not because the fire has died, but because your toes ache with a deep stabbing chill. Even inside the longhouse, warmth never lasts. That's why the Vikings wrapped themselves in layers of wool fur and skins, the real armor against the frozen north. You tug your cloak tighter, and it scratches against your chin, rough but reassuring. In this world, comfort comes second to survival. Wool is the first line of defense. Viking sheep weren't bred for softness. Their wool was thick, oily with lanolin and naturally water-resistant. Spun into yarn, woven into heavy tunics, or knitted into socks, it trapped warmth even when damp. You run your hand along the coarse weave of a sleeve and feel its stubborn resilience. This isn't fashion. It's engineering primitive but genius. Historians still argue whether the famous Viking knitting technique, nola binding, was used for socks and mittens as early as these winters. But most agree some form of clever looping stitch gave settlers extra insulation where it mattered most hands and feet. Furs and hides form the next barrier. A man stirs beside you pulling a reindeer skin over his shoulders, antlers still attached like some absurd hat stand. Another woman adjusts her hood of fox fur, the tail draped down her back, more out of function than style. These pelts carry the warmth of the animals they once covered, their dense undercoats shielding against the slicing winds. You lean closer, brushing against fur that still smells faintly of the hunt, a reminder that every garment began with a struggle in the snow. And then there are the quirky details, the little tricks only centuries of cold could teach. Straw, stuffed into boots for insulation. Layers of linen under wool to wick away sweat because wet skin in this climate was a death sentence. Even fish skin was sometimes stitched into shoes, the scales acting like waterproof armor. It sounds strange, almost comical, but when the snow rises higher than the roof, you don't laugh at practicality. You embrace it. The children are swaddled in layers until they resemble small haystacks. A boy wriggles under a fur blanket, only his nose poking out like a red button. His mother scolds him to stay covered, muttering about frost demons that creep in through uncovered skin. Whether it's superstition or clever parenting doesn't matter. The child burrows back into warmth without protest. You watch as a group prepares to step outside. The ritual is deliberate. A wool tunic, then a heavier one. Trousers, thick socks, boots lined with straw. A cloak pinned at the shoulder with a brooch. Finally, fur hood pulled low. Gloves tugged tight. By the time they're done, they look less like humans and more like walking bundles of fabric. You can almost hear modern skiers gasp in envy. No Gore-Tex, no fleece, just layers of wool and fur that do the job just as well. Scholars still debate how colorful these clothes were. The sagas describe bright dyes, reds, blues, yellows, but winter garments may have been plainer, woven in natural grays and browns. Either way, in the dim firelight, the effect is the same, a sea of shapes swaddled against the cold, their silhouettes blurred by fur, their breath billowing in clouds. The fire pops again, and you catch yourself laughing softly. You think about your modern closet rows of shoes and jackets chosen for style, and imagine explaining to a Viking why anyone would wear sneakers in snow. Here, clothing is survival. Every thread carries intention. Every seam holds the memory of a loom worked tirelessly by calloused hands. You realize that somewhere, a woman spent weeks spinning this very cloak, weaving her family's survival into each stubborn fiber. The quirky thing about wool is how it clings to you, how it holds your scent, how it never truly lets go of smoke. You inhale, and it's as if you've swallowed the hearth itself, warmth ash, and the faint musk of sheep. It's not pleasant, but it is grounding. Every Viking carried that smell. It was the perfume of endurance. You curl deeper into your cloak, pulling the fur tighter around your shoulders. The storm outside howls, but you feel less vulnerable now. Layer by layer, the settlers have built themselves armor against the elements not with steel, but with sheep, reindeer, and fox. No shining swords tonight, only wool and fur, the true heroes of the North. And you, wrapped in their scratchy embrace, finally feel the first hint of relief. The fire hums low, the animals shift, and you realize it's time to face one of the Vikings' most intimate survival strategies: sleeping in clusters. Privacy in the longhouse is about as mythical as a polite frost giant. At night, bodies become blankets, and the only rule is simple: stay close or stay cold. You shuffle deeper into the straw cloak pulled high, and suddenly a shoulder presses against yours. On the other side, a child curls up, small hand tugging at the edge of your sleeve as if you belong to the family. Behind you, the bulk of a sheep leans close, its woolly warmth seeping through layers of fabric. It's awkward, yes, but your shivering eases almost instantly. In this frozen land, dignity takes a backseat to heat. The settlers arrange themselves deliberately. Parents place children between them, using their own bodies as shields against the cold. Elders are tucked near the hearth or pressed close to the animals. Young men, less fragile, often take the drafty edges, where cold air sneaks in through walls. It's a choreography of survival practiced every night until it becomes second nature. Historians still argue whether this arrangement was rigid tradition or simple instinct, but the evidence from sagas and archaeology points to one truth: the Vikings understood human heat as a resource too precious to waste. The sensation is strange at first. Limbs tangle, cloaks overlap, and the air fills with the rhythm of breath snores and the occasional grunt of a goat. You might expect resentment, but instead, there's laughter. A child giggling when someone's beard tickles their ear, a woman shushing playfully, a man muttering about elbows in his ribs. The intimacy doesn't weaken them. It strengthens bonds, weaving family and community tighter than any wool thread. There's a quirky detail here, too. Bedding wasn't just straw and hides. Archaeologists have found remnants of herbs like tansy and heather mixed into sleeping pallets. These plants repelled insects, added softness, and maybe even carried a sweet scent that cut through the stink of livestock. You can almost smell it now, faint but soothing, a natural Viking sleep aid tucked beneath your head. As you settle into the huddle, you notice the rhythm of warmth. The center is cozy, almost too hot at times, while the edges bite with chill. People shift throughout the night, rolling inward, pressing closer, redistributing heat. It's messy, imperfect, but it works. You feel your shivering ease, your body sinking into the warmth of others, your breath joining the cloud of steam that rises from the group. And yet, even here, danger lingers. If someone rolls too far from the cluster, if a child wriggles out of their blankets, the cold finds them instantly. Death from exposure wasn't only outside. It could creep into the longhouse if vigilance failed. Mothers check their children in the dark, tugging cloaks higher, whispering protective charms. Stay near, stay warm, they murmur, half prayer, half command. Your mind drifts as the fire crackles and you think about modern bedrooms, pillows, fluffed blankets, layered thermostats glowing softly on the wall. You can't help but laugh at the thought of a Viking waking in your world, staring at a bed big enough for one person and asking, why waste all that heat? For them, warmth was communal, sleep was shared, and comfort was never individual. It was survival stitched into human closeness. The night deepens. Someone snores loud enough to shake the rafters. A child kicks in their sleep. The cow shifts again, its bulk pressing warmth through the group. You sigh, letting your body sink into the nest of cloaks, fur and straw. You may not like the smell, or the noise, or the lack of space, but you admit this much huddled together. Like this, you might just make it till morning. The first thing you feel as you stir in the longhouse is not the weight of cloaks or the press of bodies, it's the ground beneath you, hard and unforgiving. The frozen earth pushes back against your bones, a cold reminder that no matter how many layers you pile on top, winter still waits below. You shift slightly straw, crunching under you, and realize that the ground itself is an enemy. The Vikings knew this. They tried to fight it with layers of hay reeds or heather, building makeshift mattresses that softened the blow and trapped warmth. But no matter how thick the padding, the cold seeped up like water through cloth. The earth in winter wasn't just solid, it was alive with frost-sucking heat from your body, as if determined to claim you. You tug your cloak tighter and press deeper into the straw, aware of the centuries-old truth: if you sleep too long against frozen ground, you don't wake. Historians still argue about how sophisticated Viking bedding truly was. Some evidence points to layered pallets, even wooden platforms in wealthier homes, while others insist most people slept directly on straw thrown across the dirt. Either way, the ground was always there, beneath everything, humming with chill like a silent predator. You think about your modern mattress memory foam cradling you like a cloud and laugh softly. A Viking would call it witchcraft. The quirky detail bedding often doubled as insulation for animals, too. Cows and sheep lay on similar straw, their heat mingling with yours through the floor. Sometimes settlers even mixed animal dung into the layers, packing it down until it formed a crude but insulating crust. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but you also admit when survival is the goal, you stop being picky about what keeps you warm. The ground has other effects too. The dampness seeps into your cloak, making the wool heavy, your skin clammy. Every shift of position releases a faint smell of mold and earth. Children cough in their sleep. Elders wheeze softly, and you realize how easily sickness can creep in. Pneumonia chills fevers. They weren't rare visitors in the longhouse. The frozen floor was both bed and battlefield, weakening bodies slowly night after night. And yet the settlers adapted. A man rises quietly in the dark, checking the bedding, rearranging straw with a practiced hand. He shakes out damp patches, replaces them with dry reeds brought in during daylight. His movements are careful, quiet, so as not to disturb the sleepers. You watch him, realizing this simple act is as important as tending the fire. Neglect the floor and the cold winds. The fire throws a faint glow across the room, illuminating the uneven dirt. You notice patches where frost has crept in, along the edges of the walls, sparkling faintly like tiny stars. It's beautiful in a cruel way. a reminder that the outside world is always trying to sneak in. Children are pulled closer to the center, their small bodies shielded not just by cloaks and arms, but by careful distance from the icy edges of the floor. You press your palm against the earth and feel its stubborn chill. It's like touching stone carved from winter itself. You withdraw, quickly shaking the numbness from your fingers, and pull your cloak tighter around you. Every Viking knew this sensation. The earth beneath them was both foundation and foe. Some sagas even liken the ground to a giant's back cold, and merciless a being you could never conquer, only endure. Sleep comes in fits here. You roll stretch curl, always seeking a spot less damp, less cold, but the earth finds you each time. Your body aches from it. In the morning, bones, stiffened muscles, sore joints, swollen from lying on frozen soil. And yet the settlers wake, laugh, stretch, and move on with their day as if such discomfort were nothing. Maybe it was. When every night threatened death, mere aches were small complaints. There's a kind of resilience here you can't help but admire. The settlers didn't dream of feather beds or heated floors. They dreamed of enough straw, enough cloaks, enough fire to get through one more night. Comfort wasn't measured in softness, but in survival. You realize, as you curl deeper into the scratchy bedding, that the very act of lying down and rising again was a victory. Quirky as it sounds, some evidence suggests settlers laid animal hides fur side down against the ground, believing it trapped warmth more effectively. Imagine stretching out on a bearskin, the fur against the soil, the leather beneath you, a primitive but clever barrier against frost. Did it work? Perhaps. Did it feel grand? Likely not. But when the ground is trying to freeze you, even an inch of fur can feel like a miracle. Your breath fogs in the air, hovering just above your face, before fading into the smoky haze. Around you, the settlers breathe in unison, the sound, steady, rhythmic human life defying the earth's pull. The fire sputters, a goat shifts, a child mutters in her sleep, and all the while the ground hums its icy song beneath. You think again of your modern bed springs mattress toppers, maybe even an electric blanket. And then you think of here, this longhouse, this frozen soil disguised as floor. It's humbling. It makes you wonder if maybe you'd last a single week, pressed against such merciless earth, rising each day with joints aching and lungs filled with smoke. You probably wouldn't. And yet the Vikings did. In the end, you stop fighting the ground. You lie still, surrendering to its chill, but clinging to the warmth of bodies beside you. That's the Viking way. Not conquering the cold, not conquering the earth, but enduring them, weaving survival from discomfort. As you drift again toward sleep, you realize that in this frozen land, victory is measured in mornings. And tonight, with luck, you'll see another one. The smell hits you first rich earthy and faintly smoky. Even before your eyes fully open, your stomach growls, reminding you that warmth alone isn't enough to survive the northern nights. Food is just as crucial, maybe even more so, because without fuel in your belly, the fire inside you dies faster than the embers in the hearth. Tonight the longhouse smells of stew, thick and slow-cooked, a humble feast against the backdrop of winter's cruelty. You sit up brushing straw from your cloak and peer toward the hearth. A pot hangs over the coals, its iron sides blackened from countless meals. The steam rising from it curls into the smoke-drenched rafters. Inside the stew is simple dried fish, rehydrated root vegetables dug up months earlier, maybe a chunk of salted meat saved from autumn slaughter. It's not fancy, not delicate, but it's heavy, sustaining the kind of food that clings to your ribs and gives you the strength to endure the cold. A woman stirs the pot, her wooden spoon moving slowly, rhythmically. She hums as she works, adding pinches of herbs dried during the brief summer. Dill, maybe, or wild garlic. The scent sharpens, filling the longhouse, and you feel your hunger sharpen with it. Children shuffle closer bowls in hand, their eyes bright despite the dim firelight. You smile, realizing food is not just sustenance here, it's anticipation, community, and comfort all in one. Historians still argue whether Viking meals were eaten twice a day or 3 times. But in winter, the answer likely depended on what stores remained. Grain-salted fish, smoked meat, and hearty vegetables formed the backbone of their diet. Dairy, too, when animals could spare it. If the summer was good, the larders were full and bellies stayed rounder. If the harvest was poor, nights stretched long, with hunger gnawing louder than the wind. Survival was a gamble measured in meals. The quirky detail is how inventive these settlers could be. They brewed ale thick enough to chew, drank sour whey from cheese-making, even gnawed on dried seaweed when options ran low. Archaeological finds revealed charred bread baked from barley or rye, often gritty with sand or chaff, because milling was crude. Imagine biting into a loaf that doubled as exfoliation for your teeth. You chuckle knowing the settlers weren't bothered, they needed calories, not Michelin stars. You watch as bowls are filled, steaming portions ladled out carefully. Children are served first, then elders, then the rest. There's an order here, unspoken but strict. Those most vulnerable get fed before those most capable. It's fairness born of necessity. A father can endure one more night with an empty stomach, but a sickly elder or a fragile child might not. Food is rationed as much by compassion as by logic. You take your bowl, the wood warm against your palms, and lift it to your lips. The stew scalds at first, then settles into you with slow burning heat. The fish is salty, the root vegetables soft, the broth thick from oats or barley. It's heavy filling, exactly what your body craves. You swallow greedily, ignoring the way smoke stings your eyes, and feel warmth spread from your stomach outward. For the first time in hours, you almost forget the cold pressing at the walls. A man across the fire raises his bowl and mutters a toast not to the gods, but to survival. The others nod, murmuring their agreement, clinking bowls softly. It's not a grand ritual, just a small act of gratitude. In the sagas, meals are often backdrops to battles and feasts of kings, but here in the humblest longhouse, every bite is as heroic as swinging a sword. The conversation begins as the food is eaten. A grandmother tells a story of summers past, of wild berries so plentiful the children stained their mouths purple. A boy interrupts, boasting he'll catch more fish than his father come spring. Laughter ripples through the smoky air, momentarily drowning out the wind's howl. You realize food isn't just calories, it's glue. It binds people together, makes the night lighter, gives them reason to believe in tomorrow. And yet hunger is never far. The pot is scraped clean quickly, and some bowls are only half filled. You notice a woman slipping part of her portion to a child pretending she isn't hungry. Sacrifice like this isn't rare. It's a quiet rhythm of survival. Parents often went without so their children might endure. Archaeologists studying bones from Viking graves have even found signs of malnutrition, proof that winters left scars deeper than frostbite. Your belly warms, your body relaxes, but you can't shake the thought. What happens when the stores run low? You imagine empty pots, children crying, the longhouse hushed with hunger instead of laughter. The Vikings must have known this fear intimately every winter, bringing the same question: would their supplies outlast the snow? Some sagas hint at raids fueled not by glory, but by desperation, men sailing into danger simply because the larders were bare. Still, tonight is not that night. Tonight there is stew heavy and hot, and ale passed in rough cups. Someone drums fingers on the table humming a song. Children lick their bowls, chasing the last drops. A dog slurps from a wooden trough tail, thumping in contentment. For a brief flickering moment, the longhouse feels almost festive, as though warmth and food have defeated the endless night. You lean back, bowl empty cloak, snug body humming with borrowed heat. The fire glows brighter, fed with new logs, and the chatter lingers like an aftertaste. Hunger will return, cold will return. But for now, you are full, and the settlers around you are smiling. And in this frozen land, that's victory enough. The meal is finished, the bowls stacked aside, and the fire smolders with a satisfied glow. But just as your stomach settles, the longhouse shudders. At first, it's faint, like the groan of a tired timber. Then it comes again louder, a booming gust that rattles the walls and shakes snow from the roof. The storm has arrived, and in the north, storms don't knock politely. They crash through like drunken warriors, demanding attention. The wind howls around the longhouse, a voice as ancient as the mountains. It shrieks, then dips, then roars again, carrying with it shards of snow and ice. You can hear drifts piling against the walls, scraping like claws trying to dig their way inside. The children huddle closer to their mothers, eyes wide, ears straining at the sound. You catch yourself holding your breath, because even from inside, the storm feels alive, a beast prowling just beyond the door. Historians still argue whether Viking longhouses were designed with storms in mind, but one thing is clear: without them, settlers never would have endured. The roofs, low and sloping, let the wind slide over instead of tearing them apart. The walls, thick with timber and packed moss, bent but didn't break. Archaeological evidence suggests some walls were even banked with snow, deliberately turning a deadly weight into insulation. It was clever, yes, but it was also necessary. Against storms like these, cleverness was the only weapon. The quirky detail is how storms reshaped daily life. Travel stopped. Work stopped. Even speaking sometimes stopped, because the roar outside was so loud it swallowed conversation. For hours or days, families huddled in silence, waiting for the skies to calm. Food was rationed more carefully, firewood guarded fiercely. Patience stretched thinner than wool socks in the snow. And yet in those moments, sagas and songs were born. With nothing else to do, people told stories of gods battling frost giants, of heroes lost at sea, of cunning men who tricked the cold itself. The storm outside may have been merciless, but inside imagination became its own form of shelter. You glance at the doorway, where a thick wooden plank bars the entrance. Snow creeps through the cracks, dusting the threshold in white. A man rises, pulls his cloak tighter, and braces it with another beam. He mutters something about Thor's anger, half prayer, half joke. The others chuckle nervously, because when the world outside screams like this, it's easier to believe in gods than in chance. The fire sputters, threatened by the drafts, but a woman leans forward quickly, shielding it with her body as she adds another log. Sparks leap upward, defying the cold wind that slithers through the gaps. You realize the fire isn't just heat now, it's defiance. every flame is a small rebellion against the storm's howl. If the fire dies, so does morale, and so in a way does hope. Children cling to their elders. One begins to cry, frightened by the thunderous gusts. The grandmother hushes her, pulling the child close and beginning a story. Her voice rises steady calm, threading through the noise. She speaks of Skadi, the goddess of winter, who hunts across the mountains with her bow. The storm, she says, is just Skadi's laughter, and if you laugh back, she cannot harm you. The child sniffles, then smiles faintly. Around the hearth, a few adults chuckle softly, playing along their laughter, weaving with the storm's roar. Still, the danger is real. Storms could collapse roofs, trap families inside, or bury livestock alive. Archaeological digs in the north have revealed settlements abandoned abruptly, perhaps after winters too fierce to endure. You imagine waking to a doorway sealed shut by ice, weeks of food dwindling, firewood soaked, and the storm still raging. The thought sends a chill down your spine, deeper than the cold itself. Yet the settlers here don't despair. They endure. They mend clothing by firelight, twist rope, carve small tools. They share stories, sing songs, even play games with carved bone pieces. It's a strange kind of resilience to make the storm an excuse for closeness rather than collapse. You realize that while the wind shrieks outside, the inside of the longhouse grows warmer with each shared laugh, each whispered tale, each bowl of stew stretched further than it should go. Modern minds might call this madness, huddling for days in smoke and stink, while the world outside tries to bury you alive. But maybe there's wisdom in it too. Today we curse when the Wi-Fi fails. Back then, storms were reminders of what truly mattered: fire, food, stories, and one another. Everything else could wait. The night stretches long, the storm unrelenting. Snow slams against the roof, again sending tremors through the beams. You huddle closer, listening to the layered sounds, the scream of wind, the crack of timber, the steady crackle of fire, the soft murmur of voices. It's overwhelming and intimate all at once, a symphony of survival. Eventually, your eyes grow heavy. The storm still rages, but your body relaxes, lulled by the rhythm of breath around you. You sink into the straw cloak, wrap tight, fire's glow, painting your dreams. Outside, the world is chaos, white and endless, but inside, you are cocooned in resilience. And tomorrow, when the storm dies, the longhouse will still be standing. That in itself is a victory worth remembering. The storm fades, but something heavier lingers. You wake to silence, not because the world is calm, but because the world has gone dark, utterly, endlessly dark. In these northern winters, night is not a visitor that comes and goes. It is a tenant moving in for weeks, sometimes months, leaving only a few hours of dim twilight as rent. You rub your eyes, but it makes no difference. The longhouse is swallowed in shadow, firelight the only island of color. The settlers know this rhythm well. They do not measure time by clocks or calendars, but by the cycle of light and dark. And in winter, the cycle tips cruelly toward darkness. The sun may crawl above the horizon for a brief hour, casting a dull orange glow, before sliding away again as if ashamed. You step outside briefly, pushing the heavy door open, and the air slaps you like a wall of knives. The sky above is not black, but a shifting gray, heavy with clouds. The snow glows faintly, reflecting what little light exists, but it is not enough. You squint, and already your lashes freeze. Within minutes, you retreat, grateful for the smoky warmth of the longhouse. Historians still argue about how the Vikings psychologically endured such endless nights. Some suggest storytelling song and ritual filled the void. Others point to evidence of seasonal gatherings where neighbors traveled to huddle together in larger halls. A few even speculate that ale and mead played their part dulling the edges of despair. Whatever the truth, the darkness wasn't merely background, it was a constant presence pressing on the mind as much as the body. Inside, the settlers adapt. Lamps of fish oil or tallow flicker weakly, their flames trembling in carved stone or bronze bowls. The smell is acrid, smoky, and greasy, coating the air with a heaviness that clings to hair and clothes. But without them, the darkness would win. The glow is dim, uneven, painting faces in gold and shadow eyes shining like embers. It is enough to work, to sew, to carve, to eat, but never enough to forget that beyond the walls lies a void. The quirky detail is that the Vikings may have embraced the dark in strange ways. Some scholars suggest they used the long nights for crafting storytelling, even courtship. In sagas, winter feasts and gatherings are often moments of decision, marriages, arranged alliances, forged disputes settled. Darkness, rather than a prison, became a stage. Perhaps the lack of light stripped away distractions, leaving only each other, fire and words. You sit near the hearth listening. A man begins a tale, his voice steady, weaving images of Thor's hammer and Loki's tricks. The children lean forward, eyes wide, forgetting the shadows around them. Laughter erupts at the right moments, gasps at the dramatic turns. For a while, the longhouse feels bright, not from the lamps, but from the stories themselves. It strikes you that in this world, storytelling was survival. Not just entertainment, but a way to keep despair at bay. Words were torches against the dark. Still, the darkness takes its toll. Sleep becomes irregular. With no sunrise to guide them, people drift into slumber at odd hours, waking when they please, sleeping again when tired. The rhythm of the longhouse is fluid, a constant murmur of activity. Someone snores while another sharpens a blade. A child naps while her mother spins wool by lamplight. Life flows without clear divisions, as if time itself has frozen like the rivers outside. You think about modern life, about fluorescent bulbs and digital clocks slicing time into neat pieces. Here, none of that exists. Darkness dictates everything. It is both freedom and imprisonment. You could sleep 12 hours or two, it hardly matters, but the endless night weighs on your spirit, whispering doubts. Will the sun return? Will the world thaw again? Even knowing it, will faith wavers when shadows last so long? The settlers answer those doubts with a ritual. At midwinter, they mark the solstice, a turning point in the endless night. Fires blaze higher, food is shared more generously. Songs are sung louder. It's not just celebration, it's defiance. They are reminding themselves, and perhaps the gods, that they will endure until the light returns. You can almost hear echoes of those feasts, the clash of mugs, the rhythm of drums, voices rising like flames against the dark. A child tugs at your cloak, offering a carved bone game piece. You join the circle, tossing knuckle bones across a board scratched into the dirt floor. Laughter bursts as someone cheats, blatantly caught in the act. For a few moments, the darkness is forgotten, replaced by joy that feels as warm as fire. It's humbling. You realize that resilience is not always about strength. Sometimes it's about choosing to laugh when the night insists you should despair. The lamps sputter again, oil running low. A man sighs, scraping the last of the tallow into a bowl. Light dim shadows grow longer, and the longhouse surrenders once more to gloom. But no one panics. They simply adjust, huddle closer to the fire, lean on each other, and carry on. The endless dark may press against them, but it cannot break them. You wrap your cloak tighter, listening to the storm's echoes fade into silence. Outside, the world is black and vast. Inside, the fire still crackles, stories still flow, and laughter still lingers. In this frozen land, darkness is not the end of hope. It is the canvas upon which hope is painted, one flame, one story, one smile at a time. The fire sighs, the children sleep, and the longhouse sinks into silence. But silence never means safety. In this frozen world, someone must always keep watch. You sit upright, pulling your cloak closer, and notice one of the men rising slowly from the cluster of sleeping bodies. He takes a seat near the hearth spear across his knees, eyes fixed on the door. His posture says what no one speaks aloud. Even in the dead of night, danger is never far. The north has no mercy for the unguarded. Wolves prowl the edges of settlements, their howls drifting through the dark like distant horns. Bears, too, though less common, stir when hunger drives them from their dens. And there are human threats, raiders, outcasts, or even neighbors desperate enough to steal food when their own supplies run thin. To sleep unguarded in such a world is to invite disaster. Historians still argue how formal Viking night watches really were. Some sagas describe warriors rotating in shifts, guarding fire and doorway alike. Others suggest it was more casual, with whoever was restless taking the role. Archaeological finds, longhouses with single narrow doors, often barred, suggest vigilance was routine. After all, a single unguarded ember could spell fire. A single unguarded door could spell death. The man by the fire shifts the log with a stick, coaxing sparks into life. His eyes flicker toward the sleeping figures, then back to the door. His breath clouds in the dim air, steady but alert. You realize his role is more than just guard. It's anchor. While the others rest, he shoulders the fear, keeping it from spreading. The children dream because he stays awake. You notice details that make the watch harder than it seems. The smoke stings his eyes. His body aches with cold. His stomach growls softly. He has no comfort here, only responsibility. And yet there is also pride. Watching is a mark of trust. He holds not only the door, but the lives behind it. He knows if danger comes, he will be first to face it, and he accepts that burden. The quirky detail is how the Vikings may have used sound as part of their watch. Some sagas mention watchers humming, chanting, or even drumming softly to keep themselves awake. It may also have been a warning system, a steady beat, a low song, letting any prowler outside know the hall was awake, not vulnerable. You strain your ears now, and indeed the man hums faintly a rhythm that feels older than words, blending with the crackle of the fire. A dog stirs ears, pricking at something unseen. It growls low, barely audible. Instantly, the watcher stiffens, spear in hand, gaze fixed on the door. The longhouse doesn't stir. The others sleep on, unaware, but you feel the tension ripple like frost across skin. The growl fades. The dog lies down again, and slowly the watcher relaxes. No wolf, no thief, just shadows playing tricks. Still, you can see the man's grip tighten on the shaft of his spear, unwilling to trust silence too much. The hours crawl. He shifts position, stands, stretches stiff muscles, then paces slowly along the wall. Each creak of the timber, each whistle of the wind is noted and measured. He listens for what doesn't belong, for the sound of paws on snow, or a hand testing the door. Vigilance is not exciting work. It's patience sharpened to a blade. You think about modern life alarms, cameras, locks, and police. Here, none of that exists. Here, protection is as simple and brutal as a man staying awake with a weapon in hand. It humbles you, makes you realize how fragile comfort really is. Without watchers, without vigilance, even the strongest walls crumble before the smallest threats. The fire dips again, and the watcher moves quickly, feeding it another log. The glow brightens, shadows shrink, and you feel the tension ease slightly. Fire is not only warmth here, it is deterrent. Predators avoid flame. Thieves hesitate when they see light. The hearth is both weapon and shield, and the watcher knows it. Eventually, another man stirs, rubbing his eyes. The watcher nods, handing over the spear, and without words, the duty shifts. The new watcher sits shoulders heavy but willing. This quiet exchange, this unbroken chain of vigilance, is how the longhouse endures. Sleep comes in shifts, rest broken but shared. Everyone takes a turn. Everyone carries the burden. That's how community survives in the frozen north. Quirky as it may seem, some sagas even romanticize the night watch. A warrior keeping guard was not just protector, but poet, whispering prayers to Odin, composing verses to pass the time. You wonder now if these men, in their quiet hours, crafted the very words that later bards sang in great halls. Perhaps every saga begins with a watcher at a fire alone with his thoughts and the storm. The night deepens, the wind howls once more, and the new watcher straightens. You close your eyes, comforted not by the fire, not even by the warmth of bodies, but by the knowledge that someone always will keep their eyes open. And in that truth, you drift into uneasy but grateful sleep. The longhouse is quiet again, but not silent. You wake to the murmur of voices low and steady, rising above the crackle of fire. The watcher's shift has passed into something different now, prayer. In this frozen land, survival is never just physical, it is spiritual. The settlers know that no amount of fur or fire guarantees tomorrow, and so they whisper to the gods. Near the hearth, a woman kneels, hands clasped around a carved wooden figure of Thor. The charm is small, worn smooth, by years of handling its edges darkened from countless touches. She presses it to her forehead, eyes closed, lips moving softly. Beside her, an elder stirs the embers and places a piece of bread into the flames, an offering as old as hunger itself. The smell of scorched grain fills the smoky air. Historians still argue whether Viking worship in daily life was as constant as the sagas suggest, or if most rituals were tied to big feasts and seasonal festivals. But archaeological finds tiny amulets, carved idols, even traces of animal bones near hearths hint that prayer was woven into routine. In the dead of night, when storms roared and shadows pressed, faith was another form of fire. The prayers are not formal sermons. They are conversations, half spoken, half thought. A man mutters to Odin, asking for wisdom to guide his family through another season. A mother whispers to Frigg, begging protection for her children's dreams. Someone else quietly invokes Njord, wishing for calm seas when the ice breaks and fishing resumes. The gods are not distant here. They sit at the edge of the fire, listening, waiting to be called. The quirky detail is how these prayers often mixed with superstition. A child ties a knot in a strip of cloth, believing it traps the frost giant's breath before it reaches the longhouse. A woman sprinkles salt at the threshold, muttering charms to keep trolls from slipping through the cracks. Even the fire itself is treated with reverence, never left to die completely, lest spirits of cold creep inside. You can almost feel the weight of belief in the air, as thick as the smoke. Someone begins to chant, a deep rhythmic sound that vibrates through the floor. It is not a hymn exactly, but a calling and echo of ancient rituals held in sacred groves or at stone altars. Here in the cramped longhouse, it becomes something softer, more intimate. The others join in their voices, weaving together until the air hums. The children stir in their sleep, but instead of fear, they seem soothed as if the gods themselves have wrapped the room in protection. And yet faith is not only comfort, it is also bargaining. Thor, keep the storms away. Odin, watch the door while I sleep. Freya, let the earth yield again when spring comes. The settlers know the gods are fickle, demanding sacrifices quick to anger. Some sagas even hint at fear, not devotion, driving these prayers. Historians still argue whether this was true piety or desperate negotiation. But to the people in this hall, the difference hardly matters. When you live on the edge of death, you ask anyone who might be listening for help. You watch as a man draws a symbol in ash on the wall. It's a rune, simple and crude, but his hand is steady. He whispers as he writes words you don't understand, but feel deep in your bones. The rune glows faintly in the firelight, a promise carved into soot and shadow. He steps back, satisfied, and the others nod. In their minds, the gods have seen it. The longhouse is safer now. The prayers drift into stories as they always do. A woman tells of Thor's hammer, stolen by a giant and retrieved with trickery. Another recounts Odin hanging from Yggdrasil, sacrificing himself to himself for wisdom. The children perk up wide-eyed, hanging on every word. To them, these are not myths. They are instructions. If gods endure hardship, so must humans. If gods suffer for knowledge, so must mortals suffer for survival. Faith is not escape here, it is blueprint. You think about modern faith, quiet churches, orderly prayers, neat schedules of worship. This is nothing like that. Here prayer is messy, smoky, woven into every breath. It smells of bread and flames of wool, heavy with smoke of salt scattered at doorways. It sounds like whispers in the dark, chants trembling with fear and hope alike. It is survival wrapped in myth, and yet there is beauty in it. You watch as the grandmother finishes her prayer, pressing the Thor amulet into her grandson's hand. His eyes light up, and he clutches it to his chest as if it's more powerful than the fire itself. Maybe in a way it is. Belief gives him courage. Courage gives him sleep. And sleep in this world is life. The prayers fade slowly. People drift back into slumber, soothed by the rhythm of ritual. The fire crackles, shadows dance, and the longhouse exhales. You lie back down, listening to the last murmurs of devotion. Perhaps the gods heard, perhaps not, but you realize it doesn't matter. What matters is that the settlers believe they were heard, and in that belief, they find strength to face another frozen night. As your eyes close, you imagine Odin watching from the rafters, Thor standing guard at the door, Freya weaving dreams for the children. Maybe it's myth. Maybe it's real. But either way, you feel safer. And in this land where storms crush roofs and wolves circle villages, feeling safe is no small miracle. The fire glows, dim smoke hanging heavy in the rafters, and for the first time you notice the coughing. At first it's faint, a child clearing her throat, an elder hacking softly into his cloak. But as the night deepens, the sound spreads, punctuating the quiet like the creak of an old beam. You realize that in the longhouse, survival carries a hidden price sickness that comes not from the cold outside, but from the smoke inside. The hearth is life. It gives heat, cooks food, lights the dark. Yet it also fills the longhouse with a haze that stings the eyes and scorches the lungs. The smoke has nowhere to go. There is no chimney, only a smoke hole in the roof that often clogs with snow or ice. The result is a thick, acrid fog that seeps into wool, into skin, into every breath. You rub your eyes and feel them burn, blinking away tears that come uninvited. Breathing here is not clean, it is endurance. Historians still argue how harmful this constant smoke truly was. Some suggest it toughened lungs, others that it shortened lives with chronic coughs and infections. Skeletal remains show signs of respiratory disease supporting the darker view. And yet, the Vikings endured because they had no choice. Smoke was not optional. Without fire, the longhouse froze. Without fire, food rotted. Without fire, there was no life. So they lived in smoke, trading breath for warmth. The quirky detail is how settlers adapted. Some stuffed moss into cracks to direct airflow. Others angled the roof beams to guide smoke toward the opening. Children were taught to stay low where the haze was thinner. Even beds of straw doubled as filters, absorbing some of the soot. None of it solved the problem, but it made the air barely tolerable. You notice the children crawling beneath the smoke layer, as if by instinct, their small bodies learning survival before they learn speech. The coughing continues. A man leans forward, spitting into the straw. An elder wheezes in her sleep, her chest rising shallow, rattling with each breath. The sound is unsettling, more frightening in its familiarity. They do not panic. They expect it. In this world, illness is not an exception, but a companion, as much a part of life as frost and fire. You imagine how sickness spread in such close quarters. One child sneezes, and within days half the hall follows. No walls, no medicine, no isolation, only shared air, shared blankets, shared breath. Even a simple cold could linger for weeks, dragging energy from bodies already thin from hunger. More serious infections, pneumonia, bronchitis, could take lives swiftly, especially the old and the young. The settlers knew this. You can see it in the way mothers wrap children tighter, in the way elders sip herbs from steaming cups hoping for relief. One woman tends to the sick with a pouch of dried plants. She sprinkles leaves into a cup, pours hot water from the stew pot, and presses it into a man's hands. The smell of yarrow, sharp and earthy, rises through the smoke. The man drinks slowly, grimacing at the bitterness. Herbal remedies are all they have. Some work, some don't. But hope is mixed into every brew. It's not science, not yet. But it is care. And then there's the belief side. A grandmother whispers charms over a child's forehead, tracing runes in ash to chase away the breath-stealing spirits. Historians still debate how much of Viking medicine was practical herb lore and how much was magic. But here, in the smoky dark, the line blurs. When lungs burn and fevers rise, you reach for anything plant, prayer, or both. You think about modern hospitals, oxygen tanks, antibiotics, sterile masks. Here, all of that is fantasy. Here you face sickness with nothing but herbs, warmth, and hope. It humbles you, even frightens you, to realize how thin the margin of survival really was. And yet the settlers do not despair. They cough, they wheeze, but they carry on. Life doesn't pause for illness when winter is pressing at the door. The smoke thickens as the fire is fed again. Sparks leap, wood hisses, and another wave of haze rolls across the hall. You pull your cloak over your mouth, the wool scratching your lips, but filtering the worst of it. For a moment, you wonder how anyone could endure this night after night. Then you remember they didn't just endure, they grew up in it. Children took their first breaths in smoke, their lungs shaped by it. What suffocates you was simply air to them. The coughing fades into background as ordinary as the crackle of fire or the shuffle of straw. You lie back, eyes stinging, chest heavy, and think about how survival is never clean. It always costs something. For the Vikings, the cost was breath, the slow wearing down of lungs in exchange for life. And still, as you close your eyes, you hear laughter. A child giggles at a whispered joke, a mother chuckles softly, a man tells a story despite his cough. Smoke may choke them, sickness may stalk them, but it does not silence them. In that laughter, muffled and smoky though it is, you hear defiance. The longhouse is alive, even if each breath is hard-won. You drift again toward sleep lungs, aching eyes sore. Tomorrow, the smoke will still hang heavy. Tomorrow, the coughing will still echo. But tomorrow will also come, and that in this world is enough. You stir awake to an odd sound, not the crackle of fire or the coughing of sleepers, but the soft shuffle of hooves. At first, you think you're dreaming, but then the smell hits you, musky, earthy, undeniably animal. You turn your head, and there in the shadows, a cow exhales a cloud of steam, its great body shifting against the wall. Welcome to another truth of Viking nights. Animals were not outside. They were inside, living shoulder to shoulder with their human keepers. It makes sense, of course. The longhouse is both home and barn, designed not only to shelter people, but to protect their most valuable possessions, the livestock. Cows, sheep, goats, even pigs shared the hall. Horses, too, though often kept in a side stall, their heads poking curiously into the main space. The animals' breath adds warmth, their bodies radiating heat like living furnaces. You feel it now, a strange mixture of comfort and discomfort, the air heavy with both life and stink. Historians still argue how common this practice was in every settlement. Some say only the poorest kept all their animals inside, while wealthier farms built separate barns. But archaeological digs of Viking longhouses, especially in Iceland and Greenland, show stalls clearly built into the same structures as sleeping quarters. The evidence is undeniable, for many winter meant nights spent beside beasts. The quirky detail is how intertwined this relationship became. Children often named the cows, and goats speaking to them as playmates. Families measured wealth not in coins, but in how many animals stood in the stalls. Cows gave milk. Sheep gave wool, goats gave meat and hides. To lose them to the cold was to lose survival itself. Keeping them close wasn't just practical, it was essential. You shift under your cloak as the cow sighs again, its hide steaming in the glow of the fire. A sheep bleats softly, stamping its hoof, and a pig snuffles in the straw near your feet. The sounds are constant, a barnyard chorus played through the night. At first it seems chaotic, but then you realize it's comforting. These noises mean life. They mean food and spring clothing on backs, milk in cups. Silence would be far more frightening. Of course, living with animals brings problems. The smell is overwhelming at times. Urine soaking into straw dung, piled in corners. Ammonia stinging your nose. The settlers manage it as best they can, shoveling waste outside when weather allows, or simply layering more straw on top. You wrinkle your nose, but they do not. For them, it is simply the scent of survival. Archaeologists have even found layers of compacted dung beneath ancient floors, proof of years of this cycle, waste pressed down into history itself. You notice how cleverly the settlers use their animals' heat. The stalls are arranged along the sides of the hall, their bodies forming a living barrier against drafts. Children sleep nearby, tucked close to the warmth. In sagas, there are even tales of warriors bedding beside their horses, drawing strength from the beast's heat and presence. You reach out, brushing your hand across the cow's flank, and the warmth surprises you, soft, steady, reassuring. It's as good as any blanket. Yet animals indoors bring danger too. Disease spreads easily in such close quarters. Parasites jump from beast to human. Coughs echo from both throats and muzzles. Some historians believe this closeness contributed to outbreaks that ravaged communities, the price of survival blurring into the risk of sickness. You glance at the child curled beside the sheep and wonder if warmth outweighs the hazard. In this world, the answer was always yes. The settlers don't just endure this arrangement, they build their lives around it. Morning begins, not with prayers or songs, but with feeding. A man rises stumbling through straw, carrying a bucket of grain to the animals. A woman follows milking a cow before the family eats. Even in the dark of winter, chores continue because hungry animals mean dead animals, and dead animals mean dead people. The cycle is unbreakable, carved as deeply into routine as the grooves in the longhouse beams. You think about modern life pets in houses, yes, but livestock, never. You imagine explaining to someone today that you slept beside your cow for warmth and you laugh. Yet when the wind shrieks outside and frost creeps through the cracks, the logic is undeniable. Who wouldn't want a cow's body heat as a shield against death? A child stirs sitting up sleepily and resting her head against a sheep's woolly back. She murmurs something in half-dream, and the sheep bleats softly in reply. Around you, the harmony of humans and animals feels oddly tender. This is not a barn, not a home, it is both. A shared fortress against the cold built on trust between species. The quirky truth is that animals also shaped Viking identity. The sagas speak of warriors, compared to bears, to wolves, to bulls. To live so closely with beasts was to see yourself in them, to measure human strength against animal resilience. Perhaps that's why Viking culture is full of animal symbols, from Thor's goats to Odin's ravens. You cannot live beside animals without absorbing their spirit. The night deepens, and the longhouse settles into a new rhythm. The fire crackles, humans breathe, animals shift. It is a chorus of survival, rough and earthy, stitched together by necessity. You pull your cloak tighter, inhaling the mingled scents of smoke straw and livestock. It is not pleasant. It is not clean. But it is life stubborn and enduring. You close your eyes, listening to the heartbeat of the longhouse. Somewhere a pig snores louder than a man. Somewhere a sheep mutters in its sleep. And somewhere beneath all of it is the steady truth in the frozen north survival was never solitary. It was shared between family, between neighbors, even between species. As you drift toward sleep, you realize something quietly profound. The Vikings didn't conquer the cold by force. They endured it by weaving humans and animals, warmth and stink, faith and grit into one stubborn fabric of survival. It wasn't glorious. It wasn't pretty. But it worked. And in this land, working was the only measure that mattered. The longhouse exhales in rhythm, snoring men, sighing women, the occasional grunt from a cow shifting in its stall. You lie in the straw, listening, and realize another layer of Viking survival reveals itself. Hear dreams. In the endless winter nights, when time stretched like an unwound thread, Dreams were more than passing flickers of the mind. They were omens, warnings, even messages from the gods. A boy stirs first, murmuring in his sleep. His mother leans over, brushing his hair back as he whispers fragments about a wolf chasing him across ice. She nods solemnly, not dismissing it as childish nonsense, but storing it as a sign. Dreams here are recorded, shared at dawn, weighed with the seriousness of news. If wolves appear in a child's sleep, perhaps wolves circle closer outside. If a man dreams of drowning, maybe the sea will claim someone soon. Historians still argue how literally Vikings treated these visions. Some scholars suggest dreams were taken as divine truth, shaping decisions about voyages, marriages, even raids. Others argue they were just story fuel for the sagas, exaggerated in retelling. But the sagas themselves leave no doubt dreams mattered. Heroes woke trembling from visions, kings consulted seers about night terrors, and whole households shifted course because of what someone saw behind closed eyes. The quirky detail is how specific dream symbols became. To dream of fire meant luck unless it burned your hand. To dream of a dead relative meant guidance unless the relative turned away, which meant misfortune. Pregnant women's dreams were prized most of all. Their visions were thought to reveal the fate of unborn children. Imagine carrying not only life, but prophecy in your sleep. A man across the hall thrashes suddenly cloak tangled around his legs. He sits up, panting, muttering about a great serpent rising from the sea. The others hush, listening intently. An elder nods grimly. This is Jormungandr, the world serpent, and his appearance means storms or upheaval. No one laughs. No one shrugs it off. In a world where danger lurks at every corner, you cling to any hint of foresight, even if it comes wrapped in dreams. You notice the ritual that follows. The grandmother throws a pinch of herbs into the fire, the smoke curling upward like a signal to unseen forces. She murmurs a chant, half prayer, half incantation, meant to soften the omen's edge. The others nod, reassured not because the danger is gone, but because it has been acknowledged, acted upon. In this hall, ignoring a dream is as foolish as ignoring a crack in the roof. Children, too, carry their dream burdens into daylight. At dawn, they recount their visions in halting voices, and parents nod, as though hearing reports from scouts. You realize this is more than superstition. It is psychology. In a world where control is scarce, dreams give the illusion of warning, of preparation. Even if the wolf in the dream never comes, you stay sharper against real wolves. Survival here is not only about food and fire, but about keeping minds strong. And yet dreams are not only warnings, they are escapes. In the endless night when horizons vanish and days blur, dreams offer landscapes of color and warmth. A child smiles in her sleep, mumbling about green fields and sunlight. A man chuckles quietly, clearly, chasing something pleasant in his dream. These visions keep spirits alive, reminding people that not all is snow and smoke. Even false summers in sleep are worth savoring. You think about modern dreams, how quickly we dismiss them, how rarely we let them guide us. Here, they are woven into decision and story, shaping both daily chores and long sagas. Maybe that's why Viking mythology feels so dreamlike itself, because the boundary between waking and sleeping was thin, and both were treated as truth. The longhouse breathes again softer now, lulled by the fire's glow and the weight of sleep. The storm outside has passed, leaving silence deeper than before. You close your eyes, letting the sounds of snoring, shifting straw, and animal breaths blur into a rhythm. And soon, dreams take you too. In your vision, you stand on a cliff above a frozen sea. Aurora lights ripple across the sky, green and gold waves dancing over the ice. A figure approaches, cloak their face hidden, but their hand extends toward you. You take it, and warmth floods through you stronger than fire, stronger than wool. You know it's only a dream, but here that means something. Perhaps it's a blessing. Perhaps it's a warning. Either way, it feels real. When you wake again, you understand what the settlers already know. Dreams are not just shadows of the mind. They are threads in the fabric of survival, binding hope, fear, and meaning together. In the frozen north, even sleep is a battlefield, and dreams are the weapons you carry into it. The fire is low, glowing embers buried beneath ash when the whispering begins. Not the voices of the living this time, but of those who came before. In the Viking world, the dead were never truly gone. Their presence lingered in objects and memory, and on nights like this, in the silence between breaths. You sit up slowly, cloak slipping from your shoulders, and feel it too, the weight of ancestors pressing close. The settlers around you acknowledge it openly. A woman places a carved bone on the floor near the fire, murmuring the name of her mother. A man touches the hilt of a sword handed down from his grandfather, eyes closed, as though listening for counsel. The children glance nervously at the darker corners of the longhouse, as if expecting to see shadowy figures standing there watching. For the Vikings' ancestors weren't distant history. They were guardians, companions, and sometimes unsettlingly judges. Historians still argue about how literally these beliefs shaped daily life. Some claim ancestor veneration was as important as worship of the gods, while others think it was simply respect folded into sagas and burial rituals. But archaeological evidence, grave goods kept in homes, relics reused for generations, suggests a deep ongoing connection. The dead weren't left behind. They came into the longhouse, sat at the fire, and shared the night. The quirky detail is how ordinary this mingling felt to the settlers. Death wasn't distant. It lived beside them. A family might eat from a bowl that once held a grandmother's meals, wear a brooch found in her grave mound, or tell stories that kept her voice alive long after her body was gone. In this smoky hall, ancestors are not remembered, they are present. A boy stirs in his sleep, muttering about seeing his grandfather in a dream. His mother nods, knowingly, stroking his hair. "He's watching over you," she whispers. No one doubts her. Dreams of the dead are considered visits, proof that the ancestors still care. Sometimes they bring warnings, sometimes comfort, sometimes simply presence. The line between memory and haunting is blurred, and no one minds. You notice an elder by the fire whispering names one by one. He recites them like a litany: fathers, mothers, siblings, children long gone. His voice is steady, carrying the weight of years. To forget a name is to lose that ancestor's strength, so he keeps them alive by speaking them aloud. You realize it's not just remembrance, it's survival. The dead are allies in this frozen world, and calling them is like calling warriors to your side. But there is fear too. Not all ancestors are kind. Some are restless, angry at neglect or dishonor. Stories tell of Draugr revenants rising from graves, wandering in fury. Children shiver when the word is whispered, pulling their cloaks tighter. To appease such spirits, settlers leave offerings: a scrap of bread in the fire, a drop of ale poured into the earth. These small acts are insurance, a way to say, "We remember. Do not harm us." The air in the longhouse grows heavier as you sit watching. Smoke swirls oddly, forming shapes that almost look like faces. A woman hums, her voice trembling as she rocks a child. The elder continues naming the dead, his cadence steady. For a moment, you feel it, the layering of generations, the sense that every breath you take rests on the breaths of those before. It's eerie, yes, but also comforting. Alone, the settlers could never endure the long winters. But with their ancestors beside them, they are never truly outnumbered. You think about modern life, about how often the dead are hidden away in cemeteries, remembered on anniversaries, but rarely felt in daily moments. Here, that distance would seem absurd. How could you survive without the strength of those who endured before you? Ancestors weren't gone. They were survival's proof. If they lasted through winters like these, so can you. The quirky thing is how casually this belief weaves into chores. A woman sharpening a knife might mutter, "Father, guide my hand." A boy learning to split wood may hear, "Do it as your grandfather did." Even the simplest act carries the echo of the past. It's not nostalgia, it's necessity. In a world where written records are rare, memory is the library, and ancestors are its keepers. The night deepens. The children sleep again, their small faces calm. The elder finishes his recitation, sighs, and leans back, eyes shining with firelight. You feel the longhouse exhale, as though the spirits have been acknowledged and are satisfied. The room seems warmer, safer, steadier, as if unseen hands now guard the walls. You close your eyes, and in the drifting haze of sleep, you too hear whispers. They don't frighten you. Instead, they steady you, a chorus of voices from every corner of the longhouse, from every grave mound outside, saying the same thing: endure. And with that word, pressing softly against your ears, you sink into rest, carried by the strength of countless generations. The longhouse greets dawn, not with sunlight, there is none yet, but with sound. The scraping of stone on metal, the rhythmic thud of wood on wood, the murmur of voices stirring awake. Tools come out from under cloaks and piles of straw, each one more precious than gold. In the frozen north, survival depends not only on fire and faith, but on the implements crafted by human hands. A man sits near the hearth, sharpening an axe. The blade catches the firelight, gleaming with a cold beauty. Its handle is worn smooth from years of use, every dent and scratch a story. This axe is not just for splitting wood, it's for shaping homes, mending boats, felling trees, and if needed, defending life. You can almost hear the rhythm of centuries and the rasp of whetstone against steel. Without tools like this, the settlers would be as helpless as bare-handed children before the snow. Historians still argue about how advanced Viking tools were compared to their neighbors. Some scholars claim the Norse carried ironworking to remote corners of Europe, while others suggest they borrowed as much as they invented. But archaeological digs leave no doubt their axes, knives, and hammers were both simple and ingenious, tailored to the demands of survival. Iron rivets, bone needles, wooden sledges all testify to lives lived in constant negotiation with nature. The quirky detail is how multifunctional each tool was. A single knife carved wood-skinned animals, sliced bread, and trimmed wool. A hammer built ships, and also cracked skulls in battle. Even the humble spindle for wool wasn't just domestic, it was survival, turning fleece into warmth that saved lives. There was no room here for excess. Every object pulled its weight, or it didn't belong. You watch as women unroll bundles of wool and begin spinning by firelight. Their hands move quickly, twisting, winding the fibers into thread. The spindle hums a soft counterpoint to the rasp of the whetstone. Nearby, another woman threads a bone needle and begins patching a cloak, her stitches small and neat. Each loop of thread is another defense against the cold, another chance at endurance. You realize tools don't just shape wood and iron, they shape the fabric of survival itself. Children, too, have their tools. A boy practices with a small wooden bow, drawing the string back, carefully aiming at a knot in the wall. His father watches, nodding, correcting his grip with a quiet word. A girl younger holds a tiny knife, no longer than your palm, scraping bark from a stick with intense concentration. It's dangerous by modern standards, but here, danger is the teacher. The earlier you learn your tools, the longer you live. The smell of iron fills the air as a man pulls a small portable forge closer to the fire. He works with tongs, reheating nails, bent from use, reshaping them with gentle taps of his hammer. Nothing is wasted. Every scrap of iron is recycled, reforged, reborn. Archaeologists have found evidence of this frugality: patchwork repairs on tools blades reforged until almost paper thin. In the north, where metal was scarce, every spark mattered. You notice the way tools are stored, two not tossed aside but laid carefully, even reverently. A knife rests in a carved wooden sheath. An axe leans against the wall within easy reach. Needles are tucked safely into small leather pouches. Tools are treated almost as companions, not objects. Lose one, and you don't just lose convenience, you lose a lifeline. It strikes you that modern life separates us from tools. We press buttons, swipe screens, let machines labor for us. Here, survival is intimate. Every cut of the knife, every swing of the axe, every stitch of the needle ties life closer to the material world. You can't hide from it. You live in rhythm with it. The quirky truth is that tools weren't only practical, they were symbolic. A warrior's axe or sword was buried with him, marking his identity as much as his deeds. Women's graves often contained spindle whorls or shears, honoring their role as makers of clothing and warmth. Tools were identity legacy, even after death. To wield them was to claim your place in the chain of survival stretching from ancestors to children. The morning unfolds in this hum of activity. Sparks fly from the whetstone, threads lengthen from the spindle, arrows whistle softly into straw targets. The longhouse, once filled with coughs and snores, now thrums with industry. Each person, from child to elder, bends over a task. It is not frantic. It is steady, rhythmic, almost meditative. You realize this is how they endured, not just through strength, but through constant, deliberate work. The fire glows brighter as logs are split and stacked nearby, each piece a promise of warmth later. The sound of iron on stone wood, on wood thread, on cloth blends into a chorus. It is not music, but it is survival song, and it carries a quiet beauty. You wrap your cloak tighter, watching, listening, absorbing. In this place, there are no wasted movements, no idle hands. Every scrape, every stitch, every strike of hammer against nail is a refusal to yield to the frozen north. Tools, simple though they seem, are not just instruments. They are defiance carved into steel and wood. As the day darkens again, shadows lengthening across the hall, the tools are gathered, cleaned, and stored once more. The fire is fed, the animals tended, the people fed from wooden bowls. And you understand, tomorrow will bring the same rhythm, the same scraping, spinning, stitching. In this world, survival is not a grand victory. It is 1,000 small triumphs repeated with patience and precision. You close your eyes to the sound of the whetstone's last scrape, and you carry with you the truth the Vikings endured not because they were strongest, but because they worked endlessly with hands guided by tools that never failed them. The longhouse smells of wood smoke, sweat, and straw, but now another scent begins to rise: food. It drifts from the hearth, sharp and savory, pulling you toward the fire like a tether. In the frozen north, meals are more than sustenance. They are ritual celebration and a brief reminder that life can hold comfort even in the dead of winter. A woman bends over the cauldron, stirring slowly with a long wooden spoon. The pot hangs above the fire, bubbling with a stew thick enough to carry the whole hall through the night. You peer inside and see chunks of dried fish, bits of lamb bone, handfuls of barley, and herbs gathered in the last days before snow. The smell is earthy, salty, and smoky, the kind of meal that fills not just stomachs, but spirits. Historians still argue how varied Viking winter diets really were. Some claim they survived mostly on dried fish and porridge, while others point to evidence of meat stews, cheese, and even imported spices from trade routes stretching south. Archaeological finds, animal bones, charred grains, clay pots paint a picture of meals both practical and inventive. The truth seems clear. They used everything available, wasting nothing. And every meal was a balance between scarcity and ingenuity. The quirky detail is how meals doubled as preservation. Meat was smoked dried or buried in snow to last longer. Fish was salted until nearly stone hard, then softened in boiling water. Even dairy found its way into longevity. Milk turned into cheese butter buried in cool earth. A single stew, like the one before you, might hold relics of summer, each bite a taste of seasons long gone. The family gathers now, bowls in hand, waiting as the cauldron is ladled. Children are served first, their eager hands clutching the steaming bowls. Elders follow their portions, generous but respectful, an unspoken hierarchy of survival. Only after the vulnerable are fed do the strong fill their bowls. It is quiet, solemn, but not joyless. Every spoonful is a victory over hunger, and victories deserve respect. You dip your spoon into the stew and bring it to your lips. The taste is thick, smoky, heavy with salt. It is not refined, not delicate, but it is warm. The heat spreads through your chest, thawing muscles stiff with cold. Around you, others eat in silence at first, then begin to speak soft jokes, murmured thanks, stories of summer hunts or voyages. Food unlocks more than survival. It unlocks conversation, laughter, hope. The quirky truth is that Viking meals were social glue. Feasts might be rare in winter, but even simple bowls of stew carried meaning. To eat together was to remind one another of community. In sagas, meals often marked turning points. Alliances forged, betrayals revealed, prophecies spoken over cups of ale. Here in the longhouse, even the humblest meal feels woven with significance. Children scrape their bowls clean, licking the edges with delight. A woman tears a hunk of coarse bread, passing pieces around. Someone pulls out a wedge of hard cheese, its sharp scent cutting through the smoke, and shares it carefully, small slivers enough for a taste. You realize how much meaning is packed into these scraps. Bread, cheese stew together, they are not just food. They are proof that planning worked, that the harvest and hunts were enough, that survival is still possible. You think about modern meals, abundance, variety, the ease of choice. Here, there is no choice. There is what you have and what you can make of it. And yet, there is richness. The smoky stew feels heavier with meaning than any feast you've ever known. Scarcity sharpens gratitude. and gratitude makes food taste sweeter. As the meal winds down, the last bits of bread dipped into the cauldron, people lean back, sighing in quiet satisfaction. Children curl into cloaks, already drifting toward sleep. Elders sip the last of their broth, savoring it slowly, like a prayer. And you realize that meals are not simply pauses between struggle. They are the reason to endure the struggle at all. The fire crackles, the cauldron cools, and the hall grows still again. You wrap your cloak tighter, belly warm, mind steadier. Outside, winter presses harder, but inside, the taste of stew lingers, a reminder that survival isn't only about enduring. It's about savoring the small, fleeting comforts that make endurance worthwhile. The longhouse quiets after the meal, bellies warm and eyes heavy, but children never sleep as quickly as adults hope. Their whispers rise like sparks above the embers, soft laughter hidden under cloaks, small hands fiddling with scraps of straw. You watch them and realize that even here in the frozen North, childhood endures, though shaped by hardship, into something tougher, sharper than you might expect. A boy clutches a carved wooden toy, a horse with legs worn smooth from countless hands. He gallops it along the floor lips, buzzing like wind through a horn. His sister barely older braids bits of wool into a cord, humming a tune she learned from her grandmother. Their games are simple, but each carries a lesson. The horse is not just play. It prepares the boy to ride, to think of speed travel, and the importance of the animal that may one day carry him to war. The braiding teaches patience and precision, skills she will need when spinning wool becomes her duty. Childhood here is apprenticeship disguised as play. Historians still argue how much freedom Viking children had. Some say they worked from the moment they could walk, tending animals, carrying wood, learning adult tasks in miniature. Others believe play was more common, with sagas and tales told to entertain as well as teach. Archaeology gives us clues. Tiny bone skates, small gaming pieces, and miniature weapons suggest that fun and training blended seamlessly. Childhood was not an escape from labor, but preparation for it. The quirky detail is how early responsibility arrived. A girl of 6 might mind sheep. A boy of 8 might wield a real knife, not just a toy. By their teens, they were expected to work almost as adults. And yet, even in this strict rhythm, there was joy. You hear it now, in the giggles and the excited whispers about dreams, in the way a child sneaks an extra crumb of bread before hiding under a blanket. Even in survival's harshest school, mischief survives. A father leans down, telling a story to the children clustered around him. His voice is low, dramatic, painting pictures of Thor's hammer smashing frost giants. The children gasp, wide-eyed hands clutching each other's cloaks. You realize sagas were not just for warriors or poets. They were bedtime stories, filling long nights with adventure. In those tales, children heard not only entertainment, but lessons. Strength wins battles, cleverness wins wars, and courage is always required. One boy yawns, dropping his toy horse, and leans against his mother. She strokes his hair, absently, still listening to the father's tale. Around them, the other children curl into heaps of straw, settling slowly into sleep. You notice how close they sleep to one another, pressed tight for warmth and comfort. Childhood bonds are not optional. They are survival strategies. A child alone would freeze. Together, they thrive. But sickness hovers. A little girl coughs a rough sound, too deep for her small chest. Her mother pulls her close, tucking a cloak around her shoulders. You hear the faint whistle in her breath and understand how fragile life is here. Many children would not see adulthood. Infant mortality was high, winter sickness, relentless. Each laugh you hear tonight is precious because it is not guaranteed tomorrow. Parents love fiercely, but they love with the knowledge that loss lurks nearby. And yet they do not shield children from reality. A boy of 10 already helps with hunting. A girl of 12 already carries buckets of water and tends to animals. There is no waiting for adulthood. It arrives early, uninvited, as natural as winter. You watch them and see not fragility, but resilience. Their small bodies are wrapped in wool, their hands raw from cold, but their eyes shine with the same fire as the adults. The quirky truth is that Viking children learned through imitation. They watched, copied, and absorbed. A boy carves because he saw his father carve. A girl tends goats because she saw her mother do the same. Formal teaching was rare. Life itself was the teacher, and every mistake had sharp consequences. You imagine being taught not by books, but by frostbite, by hunger, by the laughter of siblings when you failed, and the pride in their eyes when you succeeded. The hall grows quieter as more children slip into sleep. One clutches his toy horse. Even in dreams, another curls into her sister's arms. The father's story trails off, his voice softening until even he drifts into silence. You realize that in this longhouse, children are not just the future, they are the reason for everything. Every log split, every stitch sewn, every prayer whispered is done so that these small bodies may live to see another day. You close your eyes, warmed by the thought. Childhood in the North is not carefree, not innocent, but it is strong, bound by family, by story, by the unbreakable need to endure. And as you listen to the soft breathing of the sleeping children, you understand they are the true measure of survival. As long as they laugh, as long as they dream, the North has not won. The longhouse grows still. After laughter and coughs and stories, silence arrives like a final guest. Outside, the wind has died. Snow presses heavy against the roof, muffling even the faintest sound. Inside, breaths rise and fall in rhythm, punctuated only by the occasional crack of firewood. You realize this silence is not empty. It is weighty, pressing down, like the snow itself. The Vikings knew this silence well. It was the silence after chores were done, after bellies were filled, after prayers and omens had been spoken. It was not peace, in the modern sense. It was the pause between battles. Winter's silence reminded them how small they were, how quickly a single storm could erase a family, how fragile each ember of life truly was. Yet it was also a silence that bound them together, the kind that could only exist when every living thing in the hall breathed as one. Historians still argue about how Vikings perceived such nights. Some say they feared the silence, believing it meant spirits were near. Others argue they cherished it, finding calm in the rare moments when survival's noise stopped. Archaeology cannot answer this, but sagas hint at both men unnerved by too much quiet, women weaving comfort, in it children lulled to sleep by it. The silence was both menace and medicine. The quirky detail is that silence itself could be a tool. Hunters learned to move like it, warriors learned to wait in it, and storytellers learned to break it with words that mattered. To sit in silence was to be trained by the North itself, as though winter were teaching endurance without speaking a word. You sit listening. The silence wraps around you like another cloak, soft but heavy. It amplifies every thought, the gratitude for fire, the awareness of sickness, the weight of ancestors, the laughter of children. In this silence, You hear all the echoes of the night you've witnessed. It is not empty. It is full of memory, of struggle, of survival. A child stirs, murmurs, then falls quiet again. A cow sighs, warm breath clouding in the air. The fire pops, sending sparks upward like fleeting stars. And then nothing again. A silence so deep it feels endless. You understand now why the Vikings filled it with prayer, with story, with song. Without those, the silence could swallow you. With them, it becomes bearable, even beautiful. You think about modern silence, rare, fleeting, often uncomfortable. Here it was constant, long, and unavoidable. Yet in its weight lay a strange kind of peace. When the wind stopped howling, when the animals slept, when even coughs faded, the settlers could finally feel the heartbeat of survival itself. Not loud, not flashy, just steady, stubborn, enduring. The fire dwindles. Shadows stretch. Sleep takes the hall once more. And you too, let your eyes close, breathing with them, carried into the silence that sustained generations. Hey guys, if you've made it this far, you've walked through the frozen nights of Viking settlers sharing their smoke, their prayers, their laughter, and their silence. You've sat at their fires, eaten their stews, listened to their dreams, and watched their children drift to sleep beside the warmth of animals. You've felt what it meant to endure not in triumph, but in quiet daily persistence. The North was never gentle. It tested every breath, every tool, every scrap of hope. And yet these people survived. They carved lives out of frost and darkness, bound together by story, by faith, by the stubborn refusal to surrender. That's the lesson. They left us not glory and conquest, but dignity and endurance. As you settle deeper into your pillow, imagine that silence. The longhouse roof, heavy with snow, the fire a faint glow, the air filled with the slow, steady breathing of family and beasts alike. Nothing to do, nowhere to go, just the sound of survival humming softly in the dark. Let that image carry you now. Breathe with it. Rest with it. You're safe, like the settlers once were, sheltered by walls, warmed by memory, protected by silence. And as sleep comes, may you carry their resilience with you, not as a burden, but as comfort. The fire is low. The hall is quiet. The night is long. But you are not alone. Sweet dreams.